I married a woman in white, but she had no reflection in the mirror. At first I thought I had found the love of my life. Beautiful, silent, mysterious. I pulled her from the river one night under the moonlight, and from that moment, my life was no longer mine. They say love can blind you, but no one warned me that it could also haunt you. This is not just a story about love. This is a story about the price of touching what should never be touched, and how the river never forgets. The river was quiet that morning. Too quiet. Kofi stood barefoot on the muddy bank, casting his fishing net into the slow-moving water. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, and mist curled like fingers over the surface. It was the kind of silence that made the heart beat louder. The elders always said, "The river never sleeps. It remembers." But Kofi never believed in old words. He believed in fish, in hunger, in survival. As he pulled in his net, something caught his eye, something pale just beyond the reeds. At first he thought it was driftwood. Then it moved. A woman, lying by the edge, her white dress soaked and clinging to her skin. Long black hair spread out like a shadow on the stones. Her eyes were open, but she didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just stared at him. Kofi froze. There was no one else around. No footprints, no boat, no reason she should be there. The river whispered behind him. He stepped closer. She blinked once, and somehow Kofi knew. This moment would change everything. Kofi knelt beside her, his hands trembling. She was breathing, barely. Her skin was cold, like she had been underwater for hours. But there was no fear in her eyes. Only silence. A heavy silence that wrapped around her like a second skin. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She didn't answer. Her lips moved slightly, but no sound came out. It was as if the river had taken her voice. Still, Kofi felt something. Not fear. Not exactly. Something deeper, like standing at the edge of a secret. He wrapped her in his cloth and carried her back to the village. She didn't resist. She didn't speak. People stared. Whispers followed him like shadows. Where did she come from? Why won't she talk? Who brings a stranger from the river? But Kofi didn't care. He named her Amina, and each day she stayed by his side. Quiet, graceful, watching the world with eyes that seemed older than time. At night, Kofi would dream of water, of drums in the deep, and sometimes he would wake up to find Amina standing at the window, staring at the moon, as if she was waiting for something or someone. Days turned into weeks. Amina never spoke a single word, but her silence became a language only Kofi understood. She moved through his home like a ghost, gentle, calm, watching everything, yet never quite part of the world around her. Kofi loved her more with each passing day. He stopped asking where she came from. He didn't care that she had no past, no family, no name before him. His heart spoke louder than his reason, and when he asked her to marry him, she simply nodded. The village was uneasy. Old women crossed themselves when she passed. Children whispered stories about the river bride with skin like snow and eyes that never blinked. One man said, "She doesn't belong here." Another said, "She isn't alive." But Kofi refused to listen. The wedding was quiet. No drums, no songs. Just the wind in the trees and Amina's pale hand in his. That night, as they stood before the mirror in their small room, Kofi smiled. But then he froze. His own face stared back. Amina's did not. The mirror showed only him, standing alone. And for the first time, Kofi felt something colder than the river. Doubt. The mirror never changed. Every morning, Kofi would wake to find Amina already standing before it, motionless, gazing at her own absence. He tried to laugh it off the first time. "Maybe the glass is old," he said aloud. But the mirror showed everything else clearly. The room, the bed, Kofi himself. Just not her. Day after day, her reflection never came. Kofi told no one. He didn't want to believe what he saw. Or didn't see. But once the doubt had entered his heart, it began to grow. One night, he placed a small bowl of water beside the mirror. Just to test. Just to be sure. He stood beside her, watching the water surface. His face rippled in it. Amina's? Nothing. He looked at her. She was right there. Eyes wide. Still. Silent. And for the first time since they met, her expression changed. She smiled, but not with joy. It was the kind of smile that made the hair on his arm stand up. Like she knew something, like she had always known, and just didn't need the mirror to see herself. The first to sense it were the dogs. They stopped coming near Kofi's house. Even the bravest ones growled from a distance, tails low, ears pinned back. One night, a stray howled outside his door for hours, then vanished. The next morning, Kofi found only its paw prints, ending abruptly in the dust. The children were next. They used to greet Kofi with laughter and songs. Now they watched him from behind trees, eyes wide, faces pale. When Amina passed, they fell silent, then ran. Even the birds stopped singing near the house. Kofi tried to ignore it. He told himself people feared what they didn't understand. But the signs were everywhere. The fruit in their basket rotted overnight. The firewood stayed damp no matter how dry the day. And one morning, the well water rose black. Thick like oil. Still, Amina said nothing. She only watched. One evening, a boy from the village threw a stone at her. It passed through her dress, but made no sound when it hit the ground. Kofi yelled at the boy, but his hands trembled. For the first time, the fear wasn't outside his home. It was sitting at his table. Smiling. The nights grew heavier. Not darker. Heavier. As if the air inside the house held secrets too old to breathe. Kofi would lie awake, eyes open, heart racing, listening. At first it was just creaking. The soft groan of wood under footsteps that never moved. Then came the whispers. Low, wet sounds rising from beneath the floorboards. He thought he was dreaming, but one night he leaned down, pressed his ear to the ground, and heard his name. Kofi. Ko-fi. He sat up in terror. Amina was standing at the door, watching him. As always. You heard it too, didn't you? He whispered. She said nothing, but she turned slowly and walked to the center of the room. She began humming. Software sad, like a lullaby from a place no child should ever sleep. The whisper stopped. Kofi didn't know what was worse, the silence or the sound. That night he dreamed of water again, but this time he saw chains beneath the river. Faces without eyes, and Amina drifting just above them, her white dress flowing like smoke, her voice finally speaking. You let me in. He woke in sweat. The floor was wet beneath his feet, and Amina was not in the bed. They called her NYSC, the blind one. She lived at the edge of the village where the trees grew too thick, and the light never stayed long. Children said she could hear spirits. Adults said nothing, but they never walked past her hut after sunset. Kofi went to her out of desperation. He didn't say Amina's name. He didn't explain the mirror, or the whispers, or the black water. But before he could speak, NYSC raised a wrinkled finger and pointed at him. She wears white, she said, but she brings no peace. Kofi froze. She is not your enemy, the old woman continued, but she does not belong to this world anymore. You brought her from the river, yes, but something else came with her. Kofi asked what she meant. NYSC turned her face toward the wind, as if listening to something only she could hear. Then she whispered, The river remembers its own. And as Kofi turned to leave, she added, She's not the first. She won't be the last, but you might be the only one who ever loved her. NYSC lit a single candle. The flame danced wildly, though there was no wind. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "There was a girl," she said, "long ago. Beautiful, like the morning mist." Her name was Amina. Kofi's breath caught in his chest. "She loved a man from the village," Nana continued, "but he betrayed her. He feared what others would say, so one night he tied stones to her feet and gave her to the river." Kofi's hands curled into fists. "The spirits took her soul, broken and drowning. They gave her a choice. Forget the world of the living, or return again and again until someone truly loved her." He asked, "So she came back?" Nana nodded slowly. "But each time it ends the same. Love turns to fear. The curse continues. She wears the white of a bride, but walks in sorrow." Kofi thought of Amina, how she watched the moon, how the mirror stayed empty, how her smile never reached her eyes. "She wants to be free," he said. Nana looked at him, her blind eyes wide. "Then free her," she whispered. "But know this, the river never gives without taking." Kofi returned home with NYSC's words heavy in his chest. That night, Amina was waiting for him at the door. No words. Just her eyes, dark, deep, and full of something that looked almost like fear. "I know," he whispered. "I know what you are." For the first time, her lips parted. A single tear ran down her cheek. "I didn't choose this," she said softly. Her voice was like wind brushing water. "I just wanted to feel love again." Kofi stepped closer. "Then stay." But she shook her head. "I can't stay unless something is given, something precious. That is the law of the river." He remembered what NYSC had said. The river never gives without taking. Amina took his hand. "If you give your breath, I can live. If you give your name, I can stay. But you Hutch will forget everything, even me." Kofi's heart pounded. Could he love her so deeply that he was willing to lose that love forever? Tears filled his eyes. "I don't want to forget you." Amina smiled. "Then you must let me go." The candle blew out, and outside the river began to rise. The sky turned gray as the river swelled. Kofi stood at the edge of the water, Amina beside him, her white dress floating in the wind like a ghost's breath. Her eyes were calm, but her hands trembled in his. "You still have time," she said. "Once the river opens, the pact must be made." Kofi stared at the dark water. It pulsed, alive, whispering ancient words he couldn't understand. "If I give my memories," he asked, "will I forget even this moment?" She nodded slowly. "You'll live, but without the part of you that loved me." He looked at her, the woman who had no reflection, the spirit who had given him peace and fear, joy and sorrow. She was not human, but she had been his. "What happens if I do nothing?" he whispered. Amina turned to the river. "Then I return, alone, to wait for another heart brave enough to carry me." Kofi's throat burned with emotion. "I want to keep you," he said, "but I want to remember you more." Amina's smile broke, just slightly, and as the river began to glow with unnatural light, Kofi stepped forward. The wind screamed as Kofi stepped into the river. The water, once gentle, now surged like a living thing, pulling at his legs, grabbing his waist. The sky above twisted with dark clouds, and a deep drumbeat echoed from beneath the surface, slow and ancient. Amina remained on the shore, her eyes locked on his. "Don't go too far," she warned. "Once it takes you, it doesn't let go." But the river had already tasted his choice. A circle of light opened around Kofi's body, casting ripples across the water. Shapes moved beneath, faces with hollow eyes, arms reaching upward, not to harm, but to witness. The spirits had come to see the price paid. One voice rose above the others, old and thunderous. "What do you offer?" Kofi took a breath, tears mixing with rain. "My memory, my name, my love for her." The water surged. Amina cried out, "Wait!" But it was too late. The river lifted around Kofi, pulled him down, not in violence, but like a mother claiming her child. He vanished beneath the surface. Silence. Then the river calmed, and on the shore Amina collapsed to her knees, whispering, "You were the only one who ever chose me." The sun rose gently over the river as if nothing had happened. Villagers found Kofi at the edge of the bank, soaked, eyes open, staring at the sky. Alive, breathing, but different. They called his name. He didn't answer. He stood slowly, looking at the village like it was a place he'd never seen before. Faces felt familiar, but names slipped through his fingers like water. At home, he found his house clean, quiet. No sign of Amina, no white dress, no second cup by the fire. Only a mirror. He looked into it. His reflection stared back, alone. Yet, sometimes in the quiet, he would hum a tune he didn't know he knew. He would walk to the river without reason, and at night he'd dream of a woman in white, always just out of reach. He didn't remember her name, didn't remember her smile, but his heart ached in a way he couldn't explain. Somewhere deep inside, love remained. Because even when memory fades, love is the last thing the soul forgets. Years passed. Kofi lived quietly, never far from the river. He spoke little, smiled less. No one ever asked why. They simply said the river had taken something from him. Something he never got back. Every morning, mist would rise from the water, curling like fingers in the air. And sometimes, if the wind was right, people swore they heard a woman humming. A soft, aching tune carried on the breeze. The elders said the river had a memory. The children said it had a ghost, but Kofi, he never spoke of it. Not even when they asked about the mirror in his house. Still hanging, still clean, still showing only one reflection. Still, he visited the riverbank each night. He would sit in silence as the sun disappeared, eyes scanning the water like he was waiting for something. Or someone. And though he could not explain it, every time the mist touched his skin, his heart would beat just a little faster, as if a part of him remembered something the rest of him had forgotten, as if the river whispered, she was real. One morning, just before dawn, a young boy named Kojo wandered too close to the river. He wasn't supposed to be there. His mother warned him of the spirits, the deep water, the dreams it could steal. But something called to him. A sound, a song, soft, sad, familiar. He followed it to the edge where the mist curled low and thick. He crouched down, listening. The voice was faint but clear, a woman's voice singing a lullaby he had never heard, yet somehow knew. Words in no known language, yet they wrapped around his heart like warmth in winter. Then, suddenly, silence. He looked into the water and saw a shape, not a fish, not a reflection. A face, eyes like the moon, hair like night. A woman in white, just beneath the surface. She smiled. Kojo gasped and blinked. She was gone. He ran home, breathless, telling the story. But no one believed him. No one, except Kofi. That night, for the first time in years, Kofi stood before the river and whispered, "Amina?" The river did not speak, but it shimmered, like it had heard him. It happened on the night of the full moon. The village was quiet, the sky clear. The river shone like silver, still and endless. Kofi stood alone at the water's edge, as he had done so many nights before. But this time, something was different. The air was warmer. The wind carried no chill, and the moon, high and perfect, reflected so brightly on the surface that it seemed to open a door between worlds. And then he saw her, across the water, standing just where the moonlight kissed the shore. Amina, She wore the same white dress. Her hair flowed like shadows. Her eyes held every sorrow and every joy he had ever known, even if he could no longer name them. He didn't speak. He couldn't. She raised her hand, and he raised his. No words. No promises. Just the quiet understanding between two souls who had once loved deeply, and maybe still did. A moment later, she faded into mist, but Kofi smiled. Because even if he had forgotten her name, even if the world moved on, the river remembered, and so did his heart.